You know that feeling when you are holding a royal flush in poker, but you check just to see if the other guy is dumb enough to go all in? That is basically how I spent the last 3 months of my life. Most people dream of winning the lottery so they can buy a private island, a yacht, or a mansion made entirely of gold and bad taste. Me? I won the lottery, a cool $12 million after taxes, and I did the one thing nobody expects. I did absolutely nothing. I stayed in my 2-bedroom apartment. I kept driving my beat-up sedan. I kept wearing hoodies that have seen better decades. Why? Because I hate moving. I genuinely despise it. Packing boxes is my personal hell. Also, I liked my apartment. It was on the top floor, corner unit, facing the park. It was quiet. It was home. Plus, there is something incredibly satisfying about having 8 figures in the bank while the world thinks you are just another average guy scraping by. It gives you a secret edge, a hidden superpower. But every superhero needs a villain, and mine arrived in a leased luxury sedan that smelled like stale cigars and desperation. His name was Gary. Gary had just purchased our building. He was the kind of landlord who read one book on real estate investing and decided he was the next mogul of the city. You know the type. Slick back hair that looked wet, a suit that was too tight in the shoulders and too loose in the waist, and a smile that did not reach his eyes because his eyes were too busy calculating how much money he could squeeze out of your pockets. The previous owner was a sweet old lady who charged us below market rent because she liked having long-term tenants who did not burn the place down. Gary, however, had a vision. He wanted to turn our cozy, slightly outdated complex into luxury living. And by luxury living, I mean, he wanted to paint everything gray, install the cheapest vinyl flooring money can buy, and triple the rent. The problem for Gary was that I had a lease, a rock-solid 12-month lease that I had signed just 2 weeks before we bought the building. Legally, he could not touch me or my rent for another 11 months and 2 weeks. But Gary was not a man who let silly things like laws or contracts stop him. It started on a Tuesday. I was sitting on my couch, enjoying the freedom of being unemployed but rich, drinking coffee and reading a book. There was a knock at the door that sounded less like a request for entry and more like a police raid. Bam, bam, bam. I opened the door to find Gary standing there, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Hello there," he said, stepping into my apartment without an invitation. "I am Gary. I own this place now. We need to talk about your situation." I blocked his path. "I am good, thanks. Rent is paid." "What situation?" Gary tried to peer over my shoulder, scanning my living room. He probably saw my old TV and my worn-out couch and assumed I was broke. He smirked, a nasty, condescending little twitch of his lips. "Well, see, we are doing some renovations," Gary said, waving his hand vaguely. "Big upgrades. Huge. We are going to need this unit. Vacant." I leaned against the doorframe. "I have a lease, Gary. 11 more months. I am not going anywhere." Gary chuckled, the sound of a man who thinks he is talking to a child. "Leases are flexible. Look, I can offer you $500 to help with moving costs if you're out by Friday." I laughed. I actually laughed in his face. $500? That would not even cover the cost of a moving truck, let alone a deposit on a new place. "No thanks," I said. Gary's smile dropped instantly. His face went from used car salesman to playground bully in a split second. "Listen to me, pal. I want to renovate this unit. I can make your life very difficult if you decide to be stubborn. Construction is loud. Dust gets everywhere. Utilities have a funny way of malfunctioning. You understand?" He was threatening me in my own home. I looked him dead in the eye. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Do your worst, Gary. Before we see how Gary manages to ruin his own life, smash that like button." It lets me know that you want more stories about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And have you ever dealt with a neighbor like this? Let me know. The war began the next morning. At 6 o'clock in the morning, specifically, I woke up to the sound of what I can only describe as a jackhammer being operated directly inside my skull. I sat up, disoriented, my heart pounding. The noise was coming from the unit directly below me. Brrrr! The floor was vibrating. My coffee mug rattled on the nightstand. I put on my robe and marched downstairs. The door to the unit below was open. Inside, two guys who looked like they would rather be anywhere else were taking a sledgehammer to a perfectly good wall. Gary was standing there, supervising, holding a coffee cup. "What is going on?" I yelled over the noise. Gary turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, good morning. Just starting the renovations. Structural repairs, very urgent. Sorry about the noise, but you know how it is. Progress." He had a smug look on his face that practically begged for a fist. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to construct an eviction, make the living conditions so unbearable that I would leave voluntarily. I went back upstairs. I did not get mad. I did not scream. I put in my custom-molded noise, canceling earplugs, the kind musicians use, which cost about $400. I went back to sleep. When I woke up at noon, fully rested, the drilling was still going. But it was just a dull hum to me. I made breakfast and decided to do some research. I hired a private investigator. Now, you might think that is overkill. But remember, I have $12 million and nothing but time. I wanted to know everything about Gary. I wanted to know where he lived, who he owed money to, and exactly how he bought this building. While the investigator, let us call him Mike, did his work, Gary ramped up his tactics. 2 days later, the water went out. I called the city. No outages reported. I called Gary. "Oh yeah," he said, sounding fake apologetic. "A pipe burst during the demo downstairs. Tragic. We had to shut off the main line. Might take a week to get the part. Old buildings, am I right? A week without water is illegal." I knew that. He knew that. He wanted me to snap. He wanted me to pack my bags and flee to a hotel, effectively abandoning the lease. Instead, I booked a room at the Four Seasons downtown for the week. I treated myself to spa days, room service, and the fluffiest towels known to mankind. Every day, I stopped by the apartment to check the mail and make sure Gary had not changed the locks. When I saw Gary in the hallway, I looked refreshed, happy, and clean. "Still here?" he asked, looking annoyed. "I thought you would have moved out by now." "No water is tough." I shrugged. "Oh, I am managing. I have a gym membership for showers. It is actually kind of like camping, very rustic." His eye twitched. He hated that I was not miserable. The water came back on 3 days later because other tenants started threatening to call the health department. Gary could not risk the city inspectors coming in because, as I would soon find out, he did not have a single permit for any of the work he was doing. Then the cold weather arrived. It was November. The temperature was dropping. Suddenly, the radiators in my apartment became cold as stone. I called Gary. "Boiler issues," he said. "Waiting on a part. Could be 2 weeks. You should probably find somewhere warmer to stay." I went to the hardware store and bought 4 high-end electric oil heaters. I plugged them in, set them to 75 degrees, and got cozy. My electric bill would be high, but I did not care. I was comfortable. Gary was losing his mind. He was burning money on a mortgage for a building where the tenants were not leaving, and he could not renovate the units to raise the rent. He was bleeding cash. That is when Mike, my private investigator, called me with the golden ticket. We met at a coffee shop. Mike slid a manila folder across the table. "Your boy Gary is swimming with sharks," Mike said. I opened the folder. It was beautiful. Gary did not really own the building. Well, he did, but he had leveraged himself to the eyeballs to get it. He had taken out a hard money loan, a high-interest, short-term loan used by flippers, to buy the place. The terms were brutal. He had 6 months to refinance into a traditional mortgage. To get that traditional mortgage, he needed the building to appraise at a much higher value. To get that higher value, he needed the rent roll to be double what it currently was. That was why he was so desperate to get us out. If he did not empty the building, renovate it, and get new tenants paying luxury prices within 3 months, the hard money lender would default him. But here was the kicker. The hard money lender was a small, local investment group that was currently having liquidity problems of their own. They were looking to offload some of their riskier notes. Gary's loan was considered high risk because he was behind on his interest payments. A slow, wicked smile spread across my face. I called my lawyer, a shark named Saul. Not really, but let us pretend. Saul, I said, I want to buy a debt. It took about 2 weeks to set up. I created an LLC with a boring name. Let us call it Oak Tree Holdings. I approached the hard money lender. They were thrilled to get Gary's toxic loan off their books. I paid them the full principal plus a little premium to sweeten the deal. I wired the money. The paperwork was signed. Officially, I was now the bank. I held the mortgage on Gary's building, but I did not tell him yet. Oh no, the sleeping dragon was awake, but he was still lying in the cave, waiting for the night to get a little closer. Gary, unaware that his tenant now owned his financial soul, decided to escalate things to a criminal level. I came home one afternoon to find my front door unlocked. My heart skipped a beat. I pushed the door open. My apartment had been tossed. Drawers were pulled out. Cushions were thrown on the floor. But nothing was missing. My laptop was there. My watch was there. It was an intimidation tactic. I checked the hidden camera I had installed in the living room vent the day Gary bought the building. I pulled up the footage on my phone. There was Gary and one of his construction goons rifling through my stuff. Look for drugs. Look for anything illegal, Gary was saying on the video. If we find weed, we can evict him for criminal activity. They found nothing, obviously, because I am boring. But they had broken into my home. This was it. The final straw. I could have gone to the police. I could have had him arrested for breaking and entering. But that was too easy. Prison is bad, sure. But for a guy like Gary, losing his ego and his money is a fate worse than jail. I waited for the first of the month, rent day. I did not pay my rent. I wanted to lure him in. 2 days later, an eviction notice was taped to my door. Not a fake one this time, but a real legal filing for non-payment of rent. Gary pounded on my door an hour later. I opened it. He was grinning. He looked like he had just won the Super Bowl. Gotcha, he said. You missed rent. You are out. I looked at him, calm as a cucumber. Actually, Gary, we need to talk. There is a meeting in the lobby in 1 hour. All the tenants are coming. You should be there. He laughed. A meeting? You think a tenant union is going to save you? I own this building. I can do whatever I want. I just smiled. See you in an hour, Gary. If you are enjoying watching this entitlement get crushed, hit the like button. It shows me that you appreciate sweet revenge just as much as I do. Trust me, what happens next is going to be satisfying. Not for Gary, of course. I went down to the lobby. I had set up a folding table and a chair. I had my lawyer, Saul, sitting next to me. I also had 2 large security guards standing by the door, just in case Gary decided to get physical. The other tenants gathered around. They looked scared. They were tired of the noise, the water shutoffs, the harassment. Gary walked in 10 minutes late, strutting like a peacock. He saw me sitting at the table and rolled his eyes. What is this circus? Gary demanded. He pointed a finger at me. You are evicted. Get packing. I stood up. I smoothed out my hoodie. Gary, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the lobby. You are right about one thing. There is going to be an eviction. Gary crossed his arms. Glad you accept it. Now get out. I shook my head. Not me, Gary. You. He looked confused. What are you talking about? Are you high? I nodded to Saul. My lawyer stood up and handed Gary a thick stack of papers. Gary, I continued, you took out a loan to buy this building, a hard money loan with Investment Group Alpha. Gary's face went pale. How do you... That is private business. It was private business, I said. Until they sold the note. You see, Gary, you missed your interest payment last month. And according to the terms of your loan, the lender has the right to accelerate the debt and foreclose immediately upon default of any payment or... And this is my favorite part. Upon discovery of gross mismanagement of the asset, Gary was flipping through the papers, his hands shaking. Who bought the note? I pointed to myself. I did. The room went dead silent. The other tenants gasped. Gary looked at me, then at the papers, then back at me. His brain was trying to process the information, but it was jamming up like a cheap printer. You, he stammered. You drive a Honda. You wear hoodies. You are broke. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. I won $12 million in the lottery 6 months ago, Gary. I just did not feel the need to broadcast it. But when you started threatening my home, I decided to invest in real estate. I walked around the table and stood right in front of him. I own the debt, Gary. I own the mortgage. And since you are in default, and since I have video evidence of you breaking into a tenant's apartment, which is a felony, by the way, I am exercising the immediate takeover clause in your contract. I signaled to the security guards. You are fired as the property manager, effective immediately. We are beginning foreclosure proceedings on the equity tomorrow, which means get out of my building. Gary's face turned a color I have never seen before. It was a mix of purple and gray. You can't do this. I have rights. I put my life savings into this deal. You put your life savings into harassing people, I corrected him. You tried to construct an eviction. You cut the water. You cut the heat. You broke into my home. And now you have lost everything. I turned to the security guards. Please escort this trespasser off the property. If he returns, call the police. Gary tried to lunge at me, but the security guards were on him instantly. They grabbed him by the arms and dragged him toward the door. I will sue you, Gary screamed, kicking his legs like a toddler. I will ruin you, I called out after him. You can try, Gary. But my lawyer is way more expensive than yours. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy. Then it was broken by a single clap. Then another. Soon the entire lobby of tenants was cheering. The old lady from 2B was actually crying tears of joy. I turned to my neighbors. Okay, everyone, listen up, I said. Rents are going back to the original rates. The renovations are canceled. I am going to hire a competent management company to fix the boiler and the pipes properly. No more noise. No more bullying. I ended up keeping the building. It is a good investment, actually. I fixed it up properly, without kicking anyone out. I replaced the windows, updated the plumbing, and put a fresh coat of paint on the hallways. As for Gary, I heard through the grapevine that he had to file for personal bankruptcy. The foreclosure wiped him out completely. He lost his leased car, his credit score is ruined, and the last I heard, he was working at a car rental counter at the airport. I actually saw him there a few months ago when I was flying out to finally take a vacation. I walked up to the counter. He looked up, saw me, and froze. I just smiled, tossed my ID on the counter, and said, I checked in online. Just need the keys. He handed them over without saying a word. The moral of the story? Be nice to your neighbors. You never know which one of them is holding a royal flush. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next one. See you in the next video.